Good morning, everyone. My name is Jordyn Smith, and I am the voice and the astrologer behind the YouTube page and the webpage called Nonconformist Conscience. And this week, I have a few things that I want to go over and talk about so that way we can all utilize what the astrology is reflecting. Especially, this is, the week that before the full moon takes place, which is happening on March 7th in the sign of Virgo, which I will be talking about next week. But for this week, let's stick to this week. So today we have Venus in a balsamic conjunction with Jupiter, both in the sign of Aries. And so it is ruled by Mars, who's in the sign of Gemini. Mars is in a square to the sun in Pisces. So to me, what this is reflecting is that there are culminating energies about where we are to utilize what we've been learning about ourselves, how we're inwardly relating, especially because Venus is still the ruler of this North Node and Uranus that are in a conjunction in the sign of Taurus. So this past year, we've all been working on how we're inwardly relating. We're really changing the way in which we are in relationship to ourselves. And with Venus in a balsamic conjunction to Jupiter, we are really tapping into what feels authentic for us, what doesn't feel authentic. Authenticity denotes honesty, right? Because if you're compensating, which is another archetype of Jupiter, Sag, when we're compensating, essentially we're not living in honesty. We're not being authentic, right? Because there's, there's a variety of reasons why one could be compensating. So we're looking at this Venus-Jupiter balsamic conjunction that is Venus ruling the North Node and Uranus in a conjunction. And we're really being called to culminate where we haven't been living authentically or honestly. Also looking at how we need to go about releasing the old way of being that is not in resonance with whom we naturally are on a soul level. So on this day, there can still be a little bit of confusion, especially with Mars, the ruler of Venus and Jupiter, being square to the sun in the sign of Pisces, which is ruled by Neptune. There can be a little bit of nebulous energy about how to go about creating an action that feels authentic and alignment with who we are. So there's a call to release, where we're having idealistic expectations or where we're outsourcing our inner validation through others. And this is a day with Jupiter, being in this balsamic conjunction to Venus, that we can start to feel the pressure, the inner pressure of exactly what this is meaning for each one of us on a soul level. With the ruler Mars being square to the sun in Pisces, we're being called to make choices that feel authentic for ourselves and to act on them. And through this, because Mars is ruled by Mercury, that is moving into a balsamic conjunction with Saturn in the sign of Aquarius, we're being asked to really stay in objective awareness so that way we can liberate from these past dynamics of when we weren't acting in our own authenticity or what was true for us, each one of us on a soul level. So there are these culminating energies that are wanting us to be utilizing them as a way to have release through the readjustment. And the readjustment comes through action. With Venus and Jupiter in the sign of Aries, when we create a action, we get a natural reaction, and that is the counterpoint for us to go out into the world, make a choice through this Mars square Sun in Pisces. And through the choices that we make, we get to understand even deeper levels of what feels authentic for us, what feels natural, what feels honest for each one of us. We go out, we create this action by making a choice, and then through the counterpoint of a reaction, we get to readjust. And through that readjustment process, we then get to release. And the release is symbolized in this sun being in Pisces, ruled by Neptune. And the release gets to diffuse the old way of being, and it promotes healing, a very Piscean archetype. So through the counter reaction of our action and our readjustment and observing what it is that feels right, doesn't feel right, we then get to release it and get to have healing promoted for us. And we get to see the truth of who we are. We get to live more fully in the truth of who we are. So then on the 2nd of March, Venus is going to move over Jupiter and be in a new phase conjunction. So we get to now act on the things that feel in alignment with who we are. And Jupiter kind of just brings in this teaching moment for each one of us. Venus will be balsamic to Chiron at that point in time. And with Chiron in the sign of Aries, we can be coming to understand where we felt like we have been wounded in the past from not making a correct choice, with this Chiron also being, ruled by Mars in the sign of Gemini. Jupiter is in a balsamic phase to this Chiron as well. And so through getting to the bottom of our desires to want to understand where we felt powerless in the past, powerless in the sense of not having the courage to really act on something that maybe we wanted to, we now get to understand where that came from and why that occurred. So on the 3rd, Pluto will be opposing the moon in Cancer, and this really symbolizes where an imbalance has been created in the past through us not answering or asking our own questions and not being able to emotionally validate. And so there can be emotional dynamics that come up for all of us at this time to really come back into alignment and to have the release that we're looking for of the past experiences that may have been traumatic to each one of us. Mercury is the ruler of this Capricorn Pluto, which is at 29 degrees. Saturn is not Mercury. Saturn is the ruler of this Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn, and Saturn is also at 29 degrees. So Saturn stays in a sign for 2.5 years. That's how long it takes to go through each sign. And so we're really culminating this whole cycle of Saturn and Aquarius, of observation and reflection leading to an awareness that leads to an inner transformation for each one of us on an individual context. So when the moon is opposing Pluto on the 3rd and the emotional dynamics are coming up, we need to continue to stay in objectivity and reflection as a way to promote the liberation that is wanting to come into fruition as we are culminating these dynamics of Saturn in the sign of Aquarius and Pluto in the sign of Capricorn. And through doing this, we continue to perpetuate this cycle of radically altering the way in which we inwardly relate. So it's radically altering our relationship to self. We're being called to ground more into the body and into whom we naturally are. There is a natural sextile between Uranus and Pisces. I talked about this the other week. And that is, in astrology, it symbolizes, coming back to where we came from, coming back to grounding ourselves within our own natural truth of whom each one of us are on a soul level. And for those who have a spiritual practice and have been implementing it, this is a time where we can really cultivate being more grounded within that, within the truth and the essence of whom we are and where we have come from, where we did come from. And this just completely, keeps us in a state of knowing, and then the choice is ours to implement what we know about ourselves in a holistic, authentic, honest way. Mercury is going to enter the sign of Pisces on the 3rd as well. And with Mercury entering the sign of Pisces, this is happening right after it makes its conjunction with Saturn. And so as these dynamics of getting to the bottom of where we may have been projecting in the past, not being able to stay grounded, in the present moment, with both of those planets being ruled by Uranus in the sign of Taurus, leading back to that Venus in Aries, we can culminate to where we haven't been able to make a choice or to act on our desires of correct choice making because we were stuck in the past, essentially. As Mercury moves over Saturn, there can be a tremendous amount of acceleration and liberation that comes about through understanding the nuances of where we learned how to get our needs met externally instead of claiming our inner authority. As Mercury moves into the sign of Pisces, we are then being asked to really release the linear side of the mind and tap into our intuitive function. And through tapping into this intuitive function, the right side of our mind, we are then able to continue this process of choice making that feels natural and authentic by implementing natural values that we have been learning along the way this past year. And through this, healing is really promoted. There's a release of where we felt disillusioned or had these experiences of buying into the delusions that are external, that are outside of us. And through understanding what it is that we're called to do on an intuitive level, we can continue to take the energy of Venus and Jupiter in the sign of Aries and get out there and act on our desires of what it is we're wanting to do. If we're wanting to be of service, if we're wanting to, what it is that feels in alignment with who we are, what types of relationships that we want to be in, considering that this is a Venus dynamic. This is also a time where we're needing the freedom and the independence to be able to move around as we develop more desires that are emanating from within that are wanting us to learn even deeper levels about ourselves. And we can't do that if we are just stuck and in the same place. I feel like with the North Node and Uranus being in Taurus, that some of us have been, kind of in this place. Jeffrey Wolfgang talks about the frog in the well, and this Venus being the ruler of the North Node and Uranus and Taurus, and Venus being in the sign of Aries, really helps us hop out of that well. So that way we can, further explore the world. And so with all of this Aries energy, it's asking us to do that. It's asking us to go out. It's asking us to act, to have the courage, to get after it, to do what it is we feel called to do. And it's on such a personal level. If you're someone who loves implementing astrology, you can take a look at where these things are falling within your own natal chart to see how this is, manifesting or being reflected in your own life. So the key is to really trust oneself, to trust that you have been doing this work, this inner work of radically altering your relationship with yourself. And with Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn, on a soul level, all of us in some way, shape, or form, depending on where this is falling in your natal chart, are being asked to enact our inner authority. So it's taking responsibility for these choices, taking responsibility for oneself to go out there, to create that reaction through the action that is necessary for each one of us on an individual level to take. So that way we can continue to culminate Pluto in the sign of Capricorn. This helps us to continue to liberate from the old structures within, creating brand new foundations, ones that we can stand on that are going to last for the long haul. So things can be coming up for people right now as well, where there can be fear, especially because Saturn is at this anaretic degree in the sign of Aquarius. And it can be really scary to make a change. It's freedom from the known, right? Is what we're taught about Aquarius and Uranus dynamics. And to liberate means to do something that one has never done before. And there can be prior lifetime memories or earlier memories of this lifetime as Mercury is moving into a balsamic conjunction with Saturn, where it can feel scary to have the courage to act on what is necessary for us to do and to utilize right now. That continues this promotion of the liberation that is definitely needed to continue this inner transformation. So we're also dealing with trauma, things that can come up. I see that Cassandra is retrograde in the sign of Libra. She's opposing this Jupiter and Chiron and Venus. So there can be fear about, am I going to be believed? If you're needing to utilize your voice and to speak the truth about something, there can be fear around, am I going to be believed? With Cassandra and the sign of Libra, though, the key is, especially with Ceres there as well, is to not abandon oneself while we're making choices, to maintain, holding boundaries that feel authentic for each one of us, that promote the healing, right? There's actually safety in having boundaries. There's also safety and security in a natural expression whenever you're maintaining healthy boundaries or you're speaking the truth of a situation. I know with me and my friends, I love, maybe this is because I have a lot of Scorpio energy, but I love whenever a friend has the courage to say something to me, and it creates a boundary, but it actually promotes it fosters a relationship that's rooted in equanimity and inclusivity, because if someone is willing to tell you the truth or to hold a boundary, it means that they really care about you. They're not trying to do something or twist it or be manipulative. They're trying to just, hey, this is something that I see. The key is to not be attached to the outcome if you're someone who's needing to speak up on something. It can feel really disillusioning or hurtful if someone isn't believing you, but we can't control how someone takes the information that is given. So if you're someone who has been mulling over needing to have a conversation with someone, and you've been in objectivity and been reflecting on this is a week where you are asked to have this conversation, and it can be liberating in some sense, and it can also be a big teaching moment, especially with Jupiter in the conversation with Venus and Chiron. There's something about this that can be really healing, really beneficial. It can help you to see the truth of the situation, to live more fully, more authentically, more honestly. But the key is definitely don't abandon yourself. Don't hold in what it is you're needing to express because you're afraid. That's how you know that you are being stuck in a karmic cycle of the past, right? We're all being called to utilize how we express ourselves in some way, shape, or form. So take a look at where this is happening in your own natal chart. If this is resonating with you, Cassandra's at 13 degrees Libra. And it's retrograde. So there's something that needs to be resolved here, right? And it can be about resolving, I'm not going to control how someone takes the information that I have to offer or that I feel called to speak on. I can only live in my own personal truth and speak on that, and they can do whatever they want with that. So there's that dynamic going on. On the 4th, Saturday, Mars is going to move into a square with Neptune. There was a square between Neptune and Mars back in August and back in November, and 11th through 15th, around each one of those months. This is the third and final square, as Mars is going to be moving out of the sign of Gemini at the end of this month. It's been a long haul. It's been in there for quite some time. So if there is something that happened back in August and in November, it can be coming back around as a way to re-experience the dynamic, so that way you can resolve it fully this time. And it is, all of this energy with Mars being in Gemini has been about choice making, especially as we've been watching Mercury move through the signs of Capricorn, Aquarius, and now moving into the sign of Pisces this week. This has been a long stretch of enacting our own inner authority through answering and asking our own questions, doing what feels right for us, continuing to learn about our own inner projections, how to live in the truth. And now, as Mercury, the ruler of Mars, is moving into the sign of Pisces and being ruled by Neptune, that will be square this Mars, we are being called to really act on our intuition about how to make a choice as we've been self-discovering the past few months. So if there's something that happened in that time period back in the middle of August and in the middle of November, it can be coming back around for us to finally resolve it, dissolve it, to see the truth, to understand it, and it can be in a really simplistic way. So where we had felt like this tension of, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to act on this choice, I don't know which choice to make, considering that it's Mars and Gemini and that there's two things to decide on. This Mercury moving into Pisces after it moves over Saturn, and this square from Mars to Neptune for its third and final time, can really help us come to a deeper understanding of what that is and really promote healing through the discernment of correct choice making. Uranus is going to sextile the sun on the 5th, Uranus being ruled by Venus, the sun being ruled by Neptune. This is in a crescent phase sextile, which is a beautiful conversation. The crescent sextile denotes that it is more, we're able to easily integrate what has came before. So as we've been discovering what our natural values are, what feels in alignment with whom we naturally are on a soul level, this sextile can bring in a energy of really being able to easily integrate that within as a way to culminate the past and implement the lessons that we've been learning for the past year. It also helps us to continue this liberation process that we've all been in, and going back to radically altering the ways in which we inwardly relate. There's something about this that is really healing. If you're someone who has been working through traumatic experiences this past year and really wanting to dive into the why did that happen? Why did I experience this? What did that mean for me? Why did my soul call this in? What was that symbolizing? This is a time period this week before the full moon next week in the sign of Virgo that we can have an ease of integration of those dynamics to really understand why exactly it happened, especially as Pluto is starting to square the nodal axis, and the resolution node being that south node in the sign of Scorpio being ruled by that Pluto at an anaretic degree in the sign of Capricorn. We are being called to really get to the bottom of these dynamics of where we didn't feel like we had natural authority. We're getting to the bottom of our judgment and our shame and our guilt, and getting to the bottom of whether or not it was conditioned or if it's natural, and how it's affected how we inwardly validate ourselves, where we felt powerless from these situations, where we might have continued doing the same thing over and over and over again because that's how we were conditioned to get our needs met. This is a week that can really help us get to the bottom of all of these emotional dynamics as a way to promote the healing that is necessary and to integrate those lessons so that way we can continue to make different choices. Mercury will also be in a sextile to the north node, meaning that as this information that is healing comes in, we're able to easily integrate it within our emotional body and become more grounded by returning back to whom we naturally are, by implementing these new values and needs, and by committing to ourselves to be able to meet our own needs instead of externalizing them. And that only comes through the awareness of why maybe we hadn't in the past. where that was revolving around our conditioning. I mean, a great thing that I've been working with clients lately, because I've been seeing this so much, is asking them, like, well, how were you conditioned whenever you were younger? Were you conditioned? How are you conditioned to get your needs met? Were you, you know, did you have to do it through ulterior motives because others wouldn't listen to you whenever you asked for what you wanted? Now is the time where we get to decide whom we want to have in our lives and whom we need to release in our lives, because it's just not, the values and the needs aren't aligning. And so there's not reciprocity, there's not giving, sharing, and inclusion within these relationships. I've been seeing this a lot lately, even on a personal level. I mean, the past couple of years, I've radically altered and changed who I even have in my life, especially with Uranus being in Taurus and these big Aquarian energies. We can be looking at friendships and needing to liberate from old ones, especially as we're coming to understand who we naturally are. There can be people who are resisting doing this work of going within and really understanding themselves and their psychology and their emotional nature, especially Pluto and Capricorn at 29 degrees squaring the nodal axis. This can be really a time where people have a propensity to want to suppress or repress and resist correct choice making and discernment and holding themselves accountable, because it's scary to do something that they haven't done before. But for those of us who are choosing to do differently, there can be a release of understanding that we're in a different season and maybe we're evolving at a more rapid pace than other people. And it doesn't mean that it has to be a blow up and to say goodbye in a dramatic way, but just to really honor the evolutionary stages that each one of the people are at in our lives, and to make a choice about how to move forward within those relationships. And this can only be done by doing the deep inner work that is necessary. And this really, what it does is it clears out, culminating these Capricorn Pluto dynamics, it clears out the energy, because Saturn is its ruler and it's in the sign of Aquarius. It is liberating these and evicting them from within to create new space, to implement new values, new ways of being. That means that it changes our inner vibration and calls in the people that we're supposed to have in our life. And, you don't want to get in the way of your own evolutionary growth, and you don't want to get in the way of someone else's. So there are choices to be made about what relationships that we want to keep in our life at this moment in time. And it doesn't have to be something that we need to feel guilty about, especially if it's coming from a place of sincerity, of truth, honesty, and authenticity. Saturn is going to enter the sign of Pisces. And so for those of you who are really feeling called to liberate themselves from old relationships, because you feel like you've been exhausting them and you're tired of doing the same thing, that energy of not only Mercury being in the sign of Pisces, but Saturn moving into Pisces can really help one to feel more connected. It speaks to connecting with spirit, with goddess on a deeper level, the inner communion of listening to the inner voice. And also it can fill the void of where maybe we're releasing these external relationships. And there's a beautiful teaching of experiencing the inner universe with this for those that feel called to be on that spiritual path. So as you clear out the old and you liberate and you rebel against it, that healing of being more connected with whom you naturally are can come in, and that consciousness can now be filling within that structure. So this is a time to not reach a place and say, oh, that's it. It is a time to still challenge the inner status quo so that it continues to promote the healing that is wanting to occur. I mean, I hear so many people talk about the collective right now and wanting to change the collective. And here's the thing is like that doesn't happen overnight. And the only way that it's going to happen is with each one of us doing our own personal work that we feel called to do. And so this is a week to get to the bottom of that, to understand it, and then to create action with all of the Aries energy. And through creating that action, we get to get outside of ourselves in a way to where we can readjust. And as we're learning through creating action and getting the necessary counterpoint of feedback through the reaction, the adjustment that occurs can as we're learning about ourselves more fully, more deeply through action, we can then come back and to nurture and foster what that is, the seeds that are being planted through that counterpoint of action. And that is how we learn. And so this is a week to really get to the bottom of certain dynamics and to be integrating all that we've been learning lately. I mean, everything. There's so many culminating energies. There's a rebirthing process of our individuality and of our identities symbolized by Venus in the sign of Aries being the ruler of the North Node and Uranus. But in order for that to occur, we have to do the Plutonian Scorpio work of holding ourselves accountable, being responsible with our choices, using the wisdom that we have been gaining from direct experience this past year and now implementing it, having the courage to implement it and go out into the world and utilize it. That way, the external is now mirroring the internal of what we've been discovering. So this is what I see this week. I hope that this helps you guys. Next week, I will be talking about the full moon and also the other energies that are playing out after the full moon. The full moon is happening on the 7th, which is Tuesday. So I will be going over that and then everything leading up to that next Monday. So I hope you all have a beautiful week. Remember to not abandon yourself and your own values and whom you are and what you've been discovering about yourself this week. There can be external events triggered this week that kind of test this. Like, are you really in alignment with yourself? Ground yourself in whom you are, reflect and observe and discern. And give yourself grace as you're learning, as you're readjusting and you're releasing. The value is in the effort. And we all have good days and we all have bad days, right? And some days are just they're whatever. But something that I do at the end of the night is I ask myself, did I do the best that I could today with what I was given? And that looks different each day. My best for each day looks different. It's not static. But if you can ask yourself that and you can answer yes, you can go to sleep knowing that all will be okay, because the intention behind that is coming from a good place. It's coming from a loving place. It's coming from a whole place. And what needs to be given will be given if you're coming from that place of sincerity. So I want you all to have a beautiful week, and I will see you next week.